As we equally know, Walter is and continues to be an outstanding member of this community. He has made an extraordinary contribution to the intellectual life of Western and to this faculty as well. As you may have learned from the profile in yesterday's Western News, Walter came to Western in 1970 to study economics.
69.
69, actually. And soon saw the light and switched to library information science. I think it's safe to say that we've all benefited immeasurably from Walter's career choices, and we continue to benefit from those choices. I think our entire campus community is the better for having Walter at Western Libraries for those many decades, including harried younger assistant professors who in the pre-internet days were trying desperately to check lecture facts, and Walter rescued them on more than one occasion. That'd be me in 1991. For more than 4 decades, Walter has, I think it's fair to say, exemplified the best aspirations of academic librarianship. It gives me great pleasure today to invite Walter to share those lessons with us, lessons of an extraordinary career.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much, Tom, for that kind introduction. I guess a line I hadn't written down before, but I guess it was a good lead-in. From the dismal science to library science. That could be another name for my program instead of my last lecture. Is the light okay back there? ITRC people, you're good? All right. So let's go. What does one say at a last lecture to one's friends, colleagues, novice students, and perhaps some of my groupies? And I recognize a few of my groupies out there. Do I even deserve to be standing here doing this? Just yesterday, as we all know, US President Barack Obama gave an acceptance speech for his Nobel Peace Prize, which was awarded, I think they decided to award it after he had only been in office for 9 days, or Craig, you're what's the number, 9, 8, something like that? A week or so? Anyway, a very short time. So at least I have longevity over the president. I've been around. In fact, I think I was in high school when he was born. Anyway, I'm reading this speech since NCB 113 doesn't come equipped with a teleprompter. I'm reading it from my Sony ebook reader. Actually, I'm not going to because I made some changes at the last minute. So I'm going to put that aside, but I do have a copy of the previous version there. And I'm going to go back to old-fashioned paper. Anyway, like a good lecture, you always have to have a backup of your PowerPoint. I ran into a problem at the last minute. Thank you, ITRC, for rescuing me. And I hope this goes well from here on. I can't really be certain, it may have been 40 years ago today for all I know, that I made one of 3 life-changing decisions in my life. First of all, the other 2 biggies, get those out of the way, were my decision to marry my wife of 41 years, Linda, who's in the second row, and we'll be taking pictures. And the other was our joint decision, of course it was a joint decision, we've been married all these years, our decision to move to London, Ontario in 1969, in August of 1969, shortly after turning 22. So I've just given away our ages, but you can do the math if you like. Okay, now to come to the one that you're all here to hear me talk about, and that's my decision to become a librarian and then go on from there. And how it's affected my life and perhaps the lives of some of you in the audience and beyond. I know many people I would have liked to have seen here who, for one reason or another, couldn't make it. And I want to share some words of hope for our library school students here. Joyce's class is here. You want to raise your hand so I know where the students are? They're all up in the front. And Joyce is taking attendance. Very good. I hope they're all here. First, a little background, and this does pertain to my becoming a librarian. A little background. I was born and raised in a suburb of Boston called Brookline. This was, in fact, the first step in my becoming a librarian. Here's that story. When my parents were deciding on where to live in the greater Boston area, they first looked at Cambridge. That's where my father went to university. And they wanted to be close to the museums and things that Harvard had to offer. And if any of you, and some of you do know my father a little bit, you know that he never missed a Harvard football game in over 30-something years. So Harvard Stadium, 10-minute drive from the house. Anyway, they wanted to be near the museums and things that Harvard had to offer. My mother, being my mother, nixed the idea of moving to Cambridge because she checked out the public library. Oh. That's the Cambridge, Massachusetts Public Library, probably the way it looked back in 1947, and decided it was subpar. I hope I haven't offended anybody who's ever worked there. Anyway, further investigation led them to nearby Brookline, Massachusetts, with a far better library system and some of the best public schools in the US. So my place of birth and even being born itself were determined by libraries. I remember very well visiting the library as a young boy, and to digress from my words for a minute, I remember the smell of the cork floors. Anybody remember libraries with cork floors? Made very quiet book trolley move. We need those in our libraries. Anyway, I very well remember visiting the library as a little boy and how proud I was of my library card when I was finally able to print my name on that little piece of cardboard, which was the requirement for holding that most valuable document. I also remember owning a book about libraries and librarians. I owned it as a child. I wish I could find it. I wish I could remember the publisher. There was a series of these books. It was a kind of graphic novel, but nonfiction, about how libraries changed the lives of people like Andrew Carnegie, who in turn changed many more lives by donating millions of dollars for the construction of what we call Carnegie libraries all over North America. This story, by the way, was the subject of a paper I wrote in my first term in library school in a library history class, where I took a controversial stand on his motives, which I claimed in the paper was for the purpose of selling more steel. But in any case, Andrew Carnegie's philanthropy was also the subject of a book by two of my favorite SLIS professors. By the way, for those of you who don't know what SLIS is, School of Library and Information Science. Okay, now we're all on the same page. These two professors were Stephen Langmead and Margaret Beckman, who used to come in every other week for a weekend. We doubled up on our classes because they came all the way from Guelph. And they, along with John Black, wrote a book called The Best Gift, a record of the Carnegie Libraries of Ontario. So if you really want the truth about what Andrew Carnegie did and why, read their book, don't take my word for it. Anyway, years passed and I attended, oh, by the way, there's the, you can't judge, I mean, look at the two libraries. Could you really tell which is a better library? No, but my mother went inside both and decided that the one on the right was better than the one on the left. So anyway, years passed and I attended Brandeis University, one of the 5 or 6 dozen colleges and universities in the greater Boston area, entering in the fall of 1965. And there, in my freshman year, I met Linda, in of all places, the Goldfarb Library. Okay, we met in the library. I mean, it's getting cornier, isn't it? during, as I say, during our freshman year. I had a part-time job, this is kind of neat, I had a part-time job working in the off-campus pharmacy, and who knows, might have decided to become a pharmacist, except for the fact that I was wrongfully accused of stealing, of all things, cigarettes from the store. For those of you who know me, if I were going to steal anything, that would be the last thing I would ever want to steal. But anyway, I was accused wrongly by this fellow of stealing cigarettes, putting them out the back door for my friends to pick up or something at night, I don't know, and I was fired. Well, insulted by this false accusation, but not being litigious, and that maybe explains why I didn't go into law, a friend of mine informed me of a job opening in a place called the Gerstenzang Library of Science that in fact just opened in 1965. Gerstenzang Library of Science. And I basically kept the job. My job was basically keeping the place open on Saturday. I mean, I had no reference training, I had circulation training, it was a manual card system. You can imagine it didn't take very much for me to be able to sit there on a Saturday and watch the door and maybe help people find the odd thing. So that was my first library job, but not to be my last. Now, quiz time. And Linda can't answer this question. Is there anybody in the audience besides Linda who knows how Leo Gerstenzang made his fortune to enable him to endow a major science library? No. Okay. The Q-tip. So thanks to the invention of the Q-tip by Leo Gerstenzang, I had a library to work in. Okay. We graduated, and by the way, images mostly courtesy of Google Images, of course. We graduated in June of 1969 and moved to London in August. Linda had a prearranged job as the humanities specialist at the Computing Center when it was called the Computing Center. And I was here to pursue a master's in economics, as Tom pointed out, a subject that I had enjoyed while earning my BA at Brandeis, but which for whatever reasons didn't really turn my crank anymore when I was here at Western. So for a number of reasons that I won't go into, I decided that it was time to think about another path. I didn't want to spend my life somehow being a dismal scientist. I needed some other kind of scientist in front of my name. So Linda and I talked over what I enjoyed doing the most, and it was doing research, at least the part of finding information for doing research. And as luck would have it, a fellow named David Bellotti lived down the hall from us in the Married Student Apartments, Bayfield Hall. And he was in his second or third term at SLIS. He was already well into the program. So David and I talked about how the program worked, about librarianship as a career in general, and it sounded like a good fit for me. So I spoke with Carmen Sprovieri, and I don't know if Carmen's there. She snuck into the back row. I spoke with Carmen, and it says here, a wonderful woman who many of you know. And I would have said that whether you were here or not, but you are, you are a dear person. And I applied to SLIS after a lovely chat with Carmen. And maybe it was easy to get in those days because I was in like Flynn. Anyway, I was accepted as an MLS student, and it began in May of 1970. I left the economics program because what was the point of staying on in that program when I was going on to something else? And I took a part-time job as a circulation and stacking clerk in the old Lawson Memorial Library. Anybody work in that place? Roger did, Margaret certainly. Any others? Hillary, Berserka, a couple of others, but mostly we think of it as Stevenson Lawson's southern end. And I awaited my first term at SLIS in May. And because there's no grade 13, there's no grade 13 in the United States, and Canadian students, or at least Ontario students, have grade 13 plus 4 years to get an honors BA, it was considered as if I had just a general BA. Well, I was therefore told I needed to study for 4 terms and not 3. Well, at the end of the first term, the new dean, William Cameron, and his wife, Pam, where did you sit, Pam, after all? Pam was right there waving. Pam, thank you for coming today. Bill came to me and said, based on my first term grades, which I think were all A's, it wouldn't be necessary to take the extra term. And I said, no way, Jose, I'm taking that extra term because I want to learn more. So anyway, in the big picture, I figured, what's an extra 4 months? You know, it helped me, I'm sure. In fact, it helped in several ways. During my 4th term, I was offered a part-time job working for Western's at that point, new chief librarian, Dr. Robert Lee. And upon graduation, this morphed into my first professional job as his administrative assistant. After 2.5 years in this position, I decided it was time to do actually what I wanted to do, and that's serve students and faculty. I successfully applied, there were several applications before that, but we won't go into those. I successfully applied, finally, for a position as a reference librarian in the DB, which had just opened, the new DB Weldon Library. And while titles and department names have changed over the years, that's where I've spent almost 36 years of my life. It's been a great ride, and now I'd like to share a few stories about the journey and perhaps a few useful tips for the current crop of SLIS. Do you call yourself SLIS or FIMS? MLIS students, okay. Now, in the early days of being a reference librarian, as we were called, we had 3 reference desks in the DB Weldon Library. Actually, if I go back to the Lawson days, we had no reference desks. We actually had no reference staff. You had to just ask around till some librarian would come out and help you if you needed help. But anyway, in Weldon, we had 3 desks for reference. One was in periodicals, where we helped literally hundreds of students a day. I've seen the stat sheets. Find articles using print indexes and abstracts, and then after that, with almost as much difficulty, using printouts or whatever the technology was to find the bound volumes that contain their articles. Now, why do I say bound volumes? Because indexing was such a time-consuming process that by the time an article was indexed, a year had gone by and we had already bound the current issues. So that's normally was bound volumes that people found their articles in. Anyway, this was the place where new staff sort of cut their teeth, as there was a relatively limited number of things to know in order to assist a user. In fact, to help me learn the collection, I took edge notch cards. Anybody know edge notch cards? McBee key sort cards? Boy, am I dating myself. Oh, John remembers, and Neville remembers. These were cards where you could punch holes on the edges and put a stick, a needle through and shake the cards, and each thing you punched was a characteristic of that index. So it might be what languages it covered, what subjects it covered, what years it covered, did it do book reviews, did it do film reviews, and I created a set of these cards. I couldn't find them at the last minute to bring. I've got some other props, but those I couldn't find. And these cards were the way you could find out, could I find a 1930s book review in German? You could keep poking the cards and find that stuff out. But that was how I learned the collection, and there was a limited amount of information you needed to learn to work at that desk. The second assistance desk was on the first floor, and it was the reference desk, where most users asked their questions and where, when it was deemed appropriate, people were referred off to one of the other two desks. And the third location, the one where things were often the most complicated, was yet another desk on the first floor, actually originally on the second floor, but I think only Roger and Margaret, maybe John, would remember that. And that was the Government Publications and Microforms desk, and it required a much greater amount of knowledge to be able to work there, because answering questions required a knowledge of things like statistics. For example, being able to convert a cost of living figure from 1961 to 81 when there was a change in the base year in 1971, I think it was. So there were lots of things you needed to know to be able to work at that desk beyond just the usual library tools. And there were also, more importantly, other things, understanding of the Canadian, American, and British political systems, so we could track debates, bills, statutes, sessional papers, votes, election results, committee hearings and reports, royal commissions, federal, provincial conferences, and thanks to Maureen in the third row, we have a very good way to track those down. And the list goes on of the kinds of things you needed to know in order to work at that desk. And much of the material was indexed, if at all, and some of it wasn't, if at all, using CODOC, the cooperative document system that we've recently mostly done away with, invented by the aforementioned Margaret Beckman at the University of Guelph. Well, we had keyword, corporate author, and title printouts, also a shelf list by call number. And to save reprinting this massive paper over time and again, we would put out supplements. Sometimes you had to check 2 supplements to make sure you found the latest material. Well, finally we switched over from paper to computer output microfiche. Now we're getting a little bit more modern. Now students needed to use a little technology, a machine to put the fiche in, to read the catalog to find out where that government document was. Anyway, days on that desk could be quite taxing. We also dealt with tax statistics. So there was a pun intended. Anyway, there were 3 desks to which one could be assigned, and one graduated, as I would say, from one to the other, so that new staff would be trained first of all in periodicals and then move on to reference and then on to government publications and microforms. And as you were able then to work on more than one desk, your day became a little more varied. You might spend the morning at the reference desk, in the afternoon in GovPubs, and the next day maybe GovPubs in the morning and periodicals in the afternoon, and the next day some other combination of those 3 desks. Very few meetings, no instructional sessions with one exception, looking back there at Craig. And basically your day was very, very much the job of a reference librarian, answering questions, helping students use the card catalog. Card catalog, you've heard of those things? The card catalog, printed indexes, printed bibliographies, reference books, now I'm looking back at Liz, the tools of the trade. Well, that was the typical kind of work, and during the busy months of November, February, and March, we sometimes handled as many as 700 questions a day. Margaret, where are you, Margaret? Margaret, where'd you go? Margaret, back there. Don't even tell us what the typical number is. We don't do 700 a day anymore, do we? No, okay. Anyway, there were relatively few meetings, as I said, little classroom instruction, except for selecting books for reference government publications, Maureen, and microfilm. There were no collections development responsibilities. Those jobs were left for faculty. They ordered books, and a different set of people known as subject librarians. Well, things went on like this for several years, and then something changed. At least in my life it did. In May of 1974, I was asked to attend a training session for something called, oh, I skipped my list. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put a note there for this one. Just pardon me for a second. This will bring some tears to some eyes, perhaps. Especially if it opens, yeah.
The longest side of the L, which is end on to us, includes the library, workspace for the library staff, 4 seminar rooms, the students' lounge, the bindery, and the printing shop. The shorter side facing us houses the administrative offices. The faculty also have their offices in this section of the building.
I'm Dr. Cameron, the Dean of the School of Library and Information Science, and I would like to welcome you to the library school. The film you're about to see was originally made for a conference of our colleagues in the Association of American Library Schools, and has now been adapted to help orient you to the physical facilities of the school.
That was my
Here
class.
are the two largest seminar rooms in use.
Anyway, I'm going to pause it. If anybody wants to see it, I'll send you the link. This was just uncovered by FIMS just a few months ago, a year ago perhaps. Somebody found it and put it on the web. So it's on the FIMS website. And I just wanted you to know that's where I went to library school. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind on my... Yes, I mentioned, no, we're getting ahead of myself here a little bit. No, I talked about Dr. Lee. Anyway, couldn't find a picture of Dr. Lee on the internet either. You know, if you're too old, you just sometimes don't make it onto the internet. Needs no title. Sorry, I'm off on my PowerPoint here. Needs no title. Ken Ole. See, I knew I was up to that clue, and I said, wait a minute, I missed some. So anyway, things went on until as much as I described from 72 to 1974. And then in May, I was asked to attend some training sessions for something called Ken Ole. Does anybody here remember Ken Ole? Not bad. Canadian Online Enquiry is what it stands for. It was started by what was called the National Science Library, or now SISTI. It offered at first just 4 databases. We have a test here. Anybody name the 4 databases? Some? Oh, sorry. Well, actually, yes, chemical abstracts, biological abstracts, engineering index, but it actually doesn't list the 4th one that was InSpec, which is for physics, electronics, and computing. Anyway, I learned how to say, doing searches in this, my job became quite different. I learned how to say corn in Latin. Anybody want to try that one? Zeamias, I hope I pronounced that correctly. And how to figure out biosystematic codes of biosis for animals and plants of which I'd never even heard. Dan, you're a science librarian, but you're in the wrong part of science, so I won't ask you. Anyway, searching databases while the clock ticked. This was I think a reference that Tom made. Is in those days, searches cost money. Every minute cost you money. Every reference cost you money. Every mistake cost you lots of money. So the clock was ticking, and you really needed a librarian or somebody from the library to be an intermediary for you. So as the clock ticked, I found that very exciting. I was always trying to find ways to make searches better and at the same time less costly. Well, a few more months passed, and then I was sent to Toronto for training on something called Lockheed Dialogue, and then also SDC Orbit, little test. Anybody know what Orbit stands for? Nobody will know this one. Maybe? No? Joyce?
Online retrieval bibliographic information orbit.
Time shared.
Okay. Got 8%.
Give that woman a promotion. Let's make her university chief librarian, university librarian. Yes. Anyway, online retrieval of bibliographic information, time shared. I didn't like that program very much. I thought it was really quite inferior to Dialogue. But anyway, these databases services at least had subjects with which I had some familiarity. PsycInfo for psychology, ERIC, which was education, the social sciences citation index, boy, I could deal with that, historical abstracts eventually, etc. And with more online services, though, came more commands to learn, more tricks to develop, more users to get to know. In October of 1977, I was put in charge of all the database searching in the D.B. Weldon Library. And I started going through the drawers and the filing cabinets, and I discovered a booklet, a little blue booklet, I wish I could find this one now too, called BRS. I went online looking for it. Google hasn't scanned it, so I don't know where it is. Anyway, BRS stood for Bibliographic Retrieval Services, and I saw really a great potential there for better searches and saving money. They had better features, I thought, than Dialogue, way better than Orbit, and certainly better than Ken Ole. And they were less expensive. However, they were only less expensive if you pre-bought a number of hours. The number of hours was 240. But you could use 5 passwords with those 240 hours. So that meant I could get it down to 48 hours of use, 4 hours a month. Did some checking. Did we use those databases 4 hours a month? Yeah, I think we did. So I had to interest 4 other libraries to join in. And I got Queen's on board fairly quickly. Guelph. No, Guelph was not one of them. Guelph actually, it was interesting because Ellen Pearson at Guelph was actually one of the people who first knew about BRS, but they didn't go into it. It was Queen's first, and then, yes, Guelph, Ottawa and Toronto. Boy, I have to check my own notes. And we all joined together in a contract that called for 240 hours a year of searching and that got us a really good low rate. And in August of 1978, I started a group called Boogie. That's the BLS Ontario Online Group Information Exchange. It was born, and a year later, Ron McKinnon from the University of Guelph and I delivered a paper at the annual meeting of the Canadian Association for Information Science in Banff, my only trip out to Alberta, so I thank the library for sending me once. And we talked about how we set up what I think is the first consortial deal in Ontario library history. Anybody have anything predating 1977 or 77? Okay, I think we were the first, at least, I mean, the CODOC system, we joined together to do cooperative document cataloging, but this was a consortial deal, an economic deal with an outside provider, and I think we actually did that first. Anyway, BRS became our database search software of choice with its more powerful Boolean and positional operators, its range of academically relevant and useful databases, and of course its lower prices. BRS even introduced email so that people could correspond back and forth among other users of the service, only among other users of the service or the company. And over the next few years, other staff in the library were trained in searching, and faculty and students would come and willingly, well, somewhat willingly, pay money in order to save time and get better bibliographic citations with which to work, as Tom well knows. Now, here's my first real story. By the way, oops, okay, we'll back up. My first real story is not a screen. I vividly remember, and I really do, one Friday afternoon when I received a panicky phone call from an undergraduate student, and I'll call her Nancy. That's not her name, but I wouldn't give out a real name in this case. Nancy said that she was desperate and needed some citations for a psychology paper that was due on Monday. This is Friday afternoon. Do we help people on Friday for papers due Monday? Sure we do, all the time. But anyway, for months I'd been telling Nancy how we could do a search, a literature search, much more efficiently and effectively than she could do manually searching the same thing. But she always said she couldn't afford it. And I said, you know, Nancy, it's only going to cost you like $5, that's all. You know, a couple of slices of pizza, whatever it comes to. Anyway, this particular day she was desperate enough to ask me for a search. So she said, can I do it? And I said, yeah, I'll do it. She said, can I do it for under $5? Again, I said, yeah, I can do it. So then she and a friend came up. She said, that's $5 between us. I can only afford $2.50. Okay, I said $5, I'll do it for $5. So she came into the office, we performed the search, and the total cost was $1.42, 71 cents each. Ever since then, not to her face, but to people like you, I call her 71 cents Nancy. Now, the story gets better. A few years later, I ran into her in a photo store, Stancy Reed, if you know Stancy Reed on Richmond Street. Fancy place, not talking Walmart here. So I ran into her in Stancy Reed, and she was picking up a huge pile, like this, of colored photographs. In those days, I was still taking slides because photographs were too expensive. And I asked her what she was up to these days. And she told me that these were vacation photos, and they were very nice vacation photos. She'd been to some pretty nice places. And what was she doing? She was now a cardiologist. I still think about how perhaps my pestering her about having a search performed and being willing to stay later than closing time on Friday afternoon may have just had something to do with where she is now. So that's my first story. Then after Thanksgiving in 1989, just over 20 years ago, a new technology entered the scene, at least here at Western. I hope I've got the right, well, is that no, sorry. Boy, I missed a whole bunch of slides there. We'll fix that in the video. CD-ROMs came into existence. These little silver, you know what they are. Silver Platter put out a product called PsycInfo. We can now search the psych literature without having to pay by the minute. MLA bibliography came out on Wilson Disk. And students had to sign up in half-hour slots. I just found a sign-up sheet the other day going through my office. So I've got records of the sign-up sheets. There were people who would try to sign up for more than one session a day, and sometimes they'd use different names, but you could tell by the handwriting. They were trying to get extra sessions in. Anyway, they had to sign up for up to a half an hour at a time, and reference staff were specifically assigned, in particular, CD-ROM duty, where we'd roam the area to provide assistance. However, most subject areas were still not covered by CD-ROMs, so online searching kept on going. But as time passed and we added more CD-ROMs, including some full-text ones, fewer people came for their library-mediated library staff-mediated searching. And my title, I think that time was actually Online Services Librarian. It's now morphed into Electronic Services Librarian. That's just one title. But it meant I had more to do with evaluating new databases and search interfaces and less to do with hands-on searching for students and faculty. It also meant a role of trainer for current and new staff in searching all of our electronic resources, new CD-ROM products, websites, databases, all that stuff. Anybody here remember Archie, Veronica, Lycos, Excite? We have a few more hands on those. We're getting more modern now. Alta Vista, remember those? Okay, Alta Vista, speaking of Alta Vista, I believe I was the first person in London, Ontario to search Alta Vista. The date was December 15th, 1995. A friend of mine in Boston called me up, or emailed me, sorry, he didn't call me, he emailed me, Harold emailed me and said, there's this new search engine called Alta Vista coming up, and here's the address, go to it and try it out. This is way before the internet looked like it did now. It was all very text. So I searched Alta Vista and I said, hey, this is really cool, I like this. Anyway, it was an improvement over what we were using, but my life changed 3 years later on January 20th. Oops. Yeah, well, all right. Yeah, these are really out of order, folks. I'm sorry. I have to go back. All right. We'll fix it. Anyway, I thought I had a slide of it, but I don't. Changed on January 20th, 1999, when I read a little piece in the London Free Press computer advertising section before going off to work. And it said the following. This is the entire article, and I thought I had a slide of it. I don't know what happened. Google promises to give you the right results first, quote, so you don't have to sift through junk, end quote. It measures the relative importance of the websites in its index based on the number of pages that link to that page, then puts the important pages at the top of its search results, thus giving you the best sites first. At least that's how it's supposed to work. Check it out for yourself. Now that's actually one of the best descriptions of how Google works that I've read in a long time, a simplified version anyway. So I did just that. I couldn't wait to get to work. I searched London, Ontario. First thing I did at home, it was a day I was working the evening shift, so I was home for a few hours, and I searched London, Ontario. Just typed in London, Ontario. First result, the official city website. Second result, University of Western Ontario. Third site, I think it was the London Free Press. Fourth site, Catholic School Board. Fifth site, Public School Board, something like that. I said, this thing really knows how to search. This was nothing like what we used to get with other search engines. So I couldn't wait to get to work that day and try it out for real. Well, I got on the desk at 4:30. My first question was to find primary sources on the Scopes monkey trial. I think we've already seen that slide go by a few times. So I entered Scopes monkey trial into Google and was blown away by the first result, a page from the Famous Trials in American History website created by the University of Missouri at Kansas City. And I hope I go the right direction. Nope. It's that one. There we are. And now it was actually kind of neat that this question had come to me because as certainly one person in this room knows very much about this trial, although it's the wrong century, Craig, but I know you know about it. I had an American history professor at Brandeis named Ray Ginger. And Ray Ginger wrote a book called 6 Days or Forever, the title referring to 6 days of creation, or maybe evolution is, still going on. So anyway, 6 days or forever. So I knew a bit about the Scopes trial, and when this page came up, I was blown away. Because take a look down the left-hand side, if you can read it, I don't know, but it has observers' accounts, excerpts from the Scopes trial transcript. It has the anti-evolution statute at the top, and by the way, it was passed in 1925. John Scopes was charged under that act of teaching evolution in a public or normal school in the state of Tennessee. Do you know when the law was repealed? I know there are historians in the audience, but maybe it's not your areas. 1967. I was in university when they repealed that law. Anyway, it's got all kinds of stuff about Dayton, Tennessee, and the textbook used by John Scopes, and biographies of key figures, and a huge bibliography, both legal and more common kinds of materials. Voila, we had a winner. From that day on, I became a Google evangelist, and eventually perhaps quickly known as Mr. Google. And this is a T-shirt that Christy back there made on a photograph based on a photograph taken by my friend Bruce. So thank you again both for this shirt. And by the way, if you were at the party on Monday, retirement party, there was a cake with this as the decoration. So if you missed the party, you've seen the cake in front of you. Anyway, that's not the nickname, however, that I want to be known by. As Google continued to add new products and new features, in November of 2004, just a little over 5 years ago, in fact, just over, Google announced Google Scholar. And I used that on day one. Somebody here emailed me a link to that, but I think I'd already discovered it. Some of you may have attended my lectures here in this building on Google Scholar. I've given 3 or 4 in the past year or so. But for those who haven't, let me just say that with over 2.5 billion, with a B, documents, books, journal articles, whatever, academic things, it has revolutionized, at least for those who've used it, the way that searching can be done. And while true, we have many hundreds of databases, and while PubMed is clearly the database of choice, or Medline even better, I think, the database of choice for medicine, and PsycInfo for psychology, and I could go on and on. Almost every subject has a really good database that's the right one. Still, Google Scholar is one resource that seems to find what other electronic resources miss. So without making this into a lecture on the features and benefits of Google Scholar, which I could easily talk about for days about, we'll continue. Okay, as the demand for online searches diminished and as fewer students needed or more accurately felt they needed our help, librarians began to be assigned to different tasks. One of the big changes was from being a generalist reference librarian to becoming subject librarians. My first foray into this territory was as subject librarian for anthropology and psychology. This was actually a bit experimental, as previously librarians were hired separately for such work, selecting materials, maintaining up-to-date approval book profiles, and liaising with faculty and graduate students. And I see Roger back there, who was one of our fine early bibliographers. I was, and I hope I didn't miss anybody else, but Roger just comes to mind when I think of that. I was the first one, or I think one of the first ones, who amalgamated the responsibilities of collections with reference and with instruction, information literacy. I took over and looked after those 2 subject areas from April 1999 to June of 2004, when I replaced them with the subject area of kinesiology. But then a few years later, in the wisdom of the administration, it was decided to move that area from being a Weldon subject area for collections, at least, for being under the jurisdiction of the Alan and Betty Taylor Library, because kinesiology, after all, is part of the Faculty of Health Science. So I gave up kinesiology, but next came other subject areas, classical studies and philosophy most recently, for short periods of time, political science and library science, and more recently I added the program in writing, rhetoric, and professional communication, for which I do very little, well, actually no collecting, but a ton of instruction, so that's been fun. Anyway, for these subject areas, the responsibilities were for book selection, both approval and firm ordering, which means ordering books on request as opposed to they come automatically, for those who haven't had a collections course yet. Faculty liaison and instruction, of course. As well, there are occasional responsibilities for the provision of evaluations for the Ontario Council of Graduate Studies for each subject area that needs to be reapproved every 7 years on a basis of 7-year cycle. And also when programs need to be upgraded, for example, classical studies was just increased from having a master's program only to a PhD program. So, then there have been other electronic resources with which I've been associated over the years. I've already mentioned Canolay, Dialogue, Orbit, BRS, and Google Scholar, but there are others. About 10 years ago, I hope the slide is forward. Yeah, at least I got one right. About 10 years ago, I was approached by Greg Moran, Western's then provost and vice president academic, to see if I could find a solution to the perceived problem. Nobody really had any data, but a perceived problem of plagiarism, especially in light of the ease with which students could cut and paste. We all know Control A, Control C, cut and paste their way through the process of writing an essay. The internet has literally thousands of websites selling pre- or custom-written papers as well as just the cut and paste method that you can use to put 5,000 words on paper in less than 10 minutes. So I did some investigating using, fill in the blank. There you go. And I used Google, and I found a fledgling company called iParadigms, which you now better know as Turnitin.com. So I investigated Turnitin.com along with a few other programs, and came to the conclusion that Turnitin.com had the best product, and after a bit of negotiations, Western became the first Canadian university to provide complete campus-wide access to this tool. Deborah Dawson, Deborah, you here today? Okay. Deborah, the head of what we now call the Teaching Support Center, and I made several presentations on Turnitin.com and plagiarism and academic integrity as well generally at several OLA winter conferences and other venues, including several universities. Another recent product, another product with which I've been identified, but which I had nothing to do with bringing to Western, is Refworks, and I want to just make a plug to on Refworks. Did nothing to bring it to Western, it just came as part of the package that arrived in 2004 called Ontario Scholars Portal, which includes things like what we call Scholars Portal Search, also known as CSA Illumina, Racer, the Interlibrary Loan Program, Open Link Resolver called Get It at Western here, and the Ozone, which is not a layer of the atmosphere, but rather a place where librarians in Ontario can share their writings, handouts, PowerPoint presentations, etc. And if you go to the Ozone, look up my name, you'll find Google Scholar and two others that I can't remember, because who remembers anything like that? Anyway, Refworks might have been one of them. Anyway, Refworks is a wonderful program. I hope you're all using it or learn how to use it soon. And it enables you to track your bibliographic references, whether they come from our online catalog or databases or even the web. I won't talk any more about that. Anyway, it's now come to the part of the talk where I have a few more stories to share. And these are some that have helped make this such a satisfying career for me. The first one goes back 3.5 decades. We're not sure exactly how long, but to a day somewhere in the mid-1970s, when perhaps because I grew up in the United States, I was asked to provide library instruction to a class called History 344E, now 3305E, but who's counting. The course covers 19th century American history, 19th century America, with an emphasis on slavery, the Civil War and post-war Reconstruction, social history, women's history, just about anything to do with the mid to end of the 19th century. The professor was a young fellow from the States named, back there, can you answer the question? Craig Simpson. Craig, wave your hand, stand up even. You're important.
You're important.
Thank you, Craig. I didn't mean for you to say that. Anyway, Craig came to London and Western at just about the same time as I did. If you were at the party on Monday, you probably heard an eloquent speech about how we were just fortuitously linked together. In fact, Craig and I used to live down St. James Street from each other for almost 30 years. Craig and his class have become legendary, and if you look at the Maclean's issue on Canadian universities, not the one that you get with your subscription, but the one you go to the newsstand and you pay $10 for instead of, it comes every week. If you look, you'll find Craig's name, I think every year, I don't know, I haven't checked it recently, but Craig is one of those professors that it says you must take his course while you're at Western. Anyway, in the fall of 75 or 6, we're not sure, Craig and I were paired up, and his students have come to the library every fall since then, with maybe one sabbatical exception, perhaps. Okay. Well, there's Refworks. There's Craig, in case you didn't see him in the back. What Craig is holding up in the right-hand picture, on the right-hand side, his left, is a copy of the first handout from 1976. I'll show you a better version of it there. And on the other side are 2 pages out of the 7 pages of the most recent version, what I call it? Final edition, I think I stamped final edition on it. Printed on blue and gray paper because it deals very much with the Civil War. When I handed these out on the tables before the students came into the room, I put the blue ones on the north side of the room and the gray ones on the south side of the room. It took me how many years? 30 years to come up with that idea of using blue and gray colored paper. One year I even alternated. The first page was blue, the second was gray, the third was blue. But generally I'm doing them now blue and gray, and I put them down by what side of the room you're on. It's just another way of having fun. And I presented Craig with a set of these at that class in November with a thank you at the end. That's the last screen right there. Anyway, that has been likely the longest running librarian professor, I'll call it tag team match, in Canadian or who knows North American librarianship. And thank you, Craig, for being such a great partner in this experience. My notes say if you're in this audience, but I knew you would be. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's every year the highlight of my year. One exception, we all know what that is, but and that was the year you're on sabbatical? Probably, no, there's another exception, but anyway, it's always the highlight of my year when we do it.
Walter, thank you, and thank you on behalf of everyone in this room. Thank you so much.
Thank you. A second story I'd like to share is about my relationship with a student named, and she's in the front row and she's starting to smile, her beautiful smile, Alexander Papakonomou, a story I'm sharing with her permission. Alex came to Western in 2001 after obtaining a diploma from Fanshawe College in developmental science. Do I have that right? Services, all right. See, glad I checked. Remind me to correct that later. Somehow, and the details have gotten lost in the mists of time, she and I were, oh, Claire, you're here. Where did I see you, Claire? There you are. I think you had something to do with this, Claire, didn't you? Claire Callahan somehow got me paired up with Alexandra to help her do her research for her history essays. To make a long story short, Alex finished her honors double BA in history and sociology in 3 years. Okay. And that would be enough of an achievement, but when you consider the fact that Alex has been totally blind since the age of 13, this is truly amazing. I still remember the day that she told me she wanted to pursue a master's degree in history. I immediately thought of a blind undergraduate classmate of mine who had earned a PhD in history at Boston College, who was teaching in Boston area university. And to make things even more interesting, Nick is ethnically Greek, as is Alexandra. So with her permission, I gave Nick her phone number, and within days, actually that same night, Nick called her, and within days they were back and forth corresponding and phoning and becoming mentor and, is there a word, mentee? If not, there is now, if that's the word. They've met and become good friends, and making this connection for them was a very, very satisfying thing for me. Alex spent 1 more year at Western, earned an MA in history, and after several years away from London, she called me about a year ago, December, and asked if I would help her with her LSAT application. Let me tell you, if you want to apply to law school, it's a little easier if you can read, because the LSAT is not, it's a PDF, and it's not readable on any machine that, at least that Alex has. So I helped her over the phone with her LSAT application. She provided the information, I filled it out, and I happily also offered to write a letter of reference for her, recommendation for her, to the list of law schools to which she was applying, which included, fortunately, Western. Well, Alex is in first year law here now, and I won't embarrass her by telling how well she's doing, but I can just say I am very proud of how she's doing exceedingly well. With the assistance of her trusty guide poodle Buckles, who's been very quiet in the front row, and with the help of a whole lot of library staff from the John and Dot Sabito Family Law Library. Any law librarians here? Law people? Okay, good. We thank you all for being Alex's new friend. I promised her that I'll be there for her graduation, although I am sorry that I'm not going to be able to help her as a librarian along the way. I told her when she was applying and when she decided to come to Western, this was in April that she was accepted, I think, and I said, Alex, I'm glad you came to Western for a lot of reasons. One, because I like you. 2, because you're familiar with the campus, it'll be a lot easier. You know the people, you know the services, you know Buckles knows her way around and so forth. But that was April, and then June I made that decision to retire. And so I kind of pulled the rug out from under you, and I apologize for that. But I will help you as much as I can after the law library has done its job. If you need me, just give me a call. If any days were less than wonderful, and there were very few that might have been called less than wonderful, having a friend like Alex has made it just so much better. The third and final story, by the way, there's Alex, in case you, and Buckles, and the Faculty of Law. This was from the Western News back in October. Third and final story is one that happened about 20 or 25 years ago. I've lost track of the date, and I have unfortunately no records to prove this, but it happened. I was working alone on an evening shift at the reference desk, the big old orange semicircular one. You remember that one, some of you? Anyway, an older woman approached the desk and asked if we had old copies of books in print. Old copies of books in print. Kind of it's like a oxymoron, isn't it? Kind of old copy of books in print. My first thought was that we might still have some from a few years back up in the oversized Zeds upstairs on the 5th floor, but instead I asked her what it was she wanted, because most people don't usually want old copies of books in print. They may want to know what's in print now, they may want to know what was published in a certain year, or what libraries hold a book. I mean, there are questions like that make sense to ask. This question didn't make a lot of sense, but anyway, I asked her, what year is it you're looking for? You know, maybe if it's the last couple of years, we have it. Her answer was 1958. Okay, remember this would have been around 78 maybe, 80, I don't know, somewhere around there. I was intrigued, so I asked her the author's name she was looking for, and she said Frank Smith. Now, I think you'll all agree Frank Smith is a fairly common name. Anybody here know somebody named Frank Smith? Raise your hands if you do. Okay, a few of you anyway. I thought everybody's hand would have gone up. But anyways, fairly common name. My next words to her were, are you by chance looking for Harry Vernon at Prep? Courtesy of Amazon. Harry Vernon at Prep. She said, how could you know that? How could a librarian in London, Ontario, I don't know if she said these words, but I'm sort of paraphrasing. How would a librarian in London, Ontario know, with the little information I gave him, a 1958 book by Frank Smith, that the book I'm looking for is Harry Vernon at Prep? Well, I told her it was very simple. Frank Smith had been my grade 9 history teacher in Brookline, Massachusetts. Remember I said Brookline has one, and still does have one of the best public school systems in the United States? Frank Smith is a Harvard graduate teaching high school at Brookline High School. Not anymore, but he was back in 1961, 62 when he was my teacher. Anyway, the book is, you look at this little bit out of Google Books, refers to this book as, it says 1960, but that's wrong. Harry Vernon at Prep. Les always had a copy with him, Ben said. It was a sacred text. Frank Smith's novel follows a con man who stumbles into a position teaching literature at a New Hampshire boarding school, lampoons the phonous, balonus, pomposity of stuffed-shirt academics, while contending with the real intellectuals. Anyway, it goes on. I'll send you the link if you want it. In any case, so I knew Frank Smith. In fact, there's a picture of Frank Smith. Now, remember I said it's hard to find pictures of people on the internet unless they're really very, very, very famous or still modern. Linda helped me scan that from my 1962 high school yearbook. He happened to be one of the teachers who had one of the larger photos, so it was scannable. And there's my good friend Frank Smith with his duffel, his briefcase that's always on an angle. That's just iconic, that picture. So there's Frank Smith. Anyway, the story gets better. By the way, my sister had a copy of the book. I didn't, fortunately, have time to get it from Boston to hold up here, but if I had had it, I would have held it up. I have another book to hold up, though, in a minute. Anyway, our mysterious library user was a writer who had been corresponding with Frank Smith, and she went home that evening and called him to tell him the story I just told you. Oh, yes. And her name was Alice Munro. Moons of Jupiter, autographed by Alice Munro. I do have props, just not all the ones I'd like to have. So, oh, lovely. What did I click on there? 1 degree of separation. I mean, who in London, Ontario knows both Frank Smith and Alice Munro? Well, I think now you do, but not personally. I know both personally. And she's given me permission to tell the story. I have to say that because we do have certain rules of ethics that we follow. We don't share users' names with other people. And she's given me permission to tell the story. And every time I see her, she reminds me of the story. So anyway. Okay, this brings us to what one expects when one attends a last lecture. Words of wisdom gained from many years of experience. In my own religious tradition, that conjures up the 10 Commandments. And since, according to my tradition, I was there 3,300 years ago at Mount Sinai, that's what we believe, that I was there 3,300 years ago, or some earlier spirit of me was. I think I know a little bit about these words that some people derisively call the 10 suggestions. But since I'm neither God nor Moses, I'll have to call mine the 10 suggestions. And this is what I have to share with you today. From the Home Office in London, Ontario, to take David Letterman's intro, Walter Zimmerman's 10 suggestions for successful librarianship. Okay, any Latin scholars? I'm supposed to be one. How about you, Roger? Can you do that one?
Let the searcher beware.
Give Roger a hand. Absolutely. Absolutely correct. Searcher beware. I learned this from a plaque. In fact, that's a photograph of the central part of the plaque given to me by my son's father-in-law. I think he had it made, actually. And it means searcher beware, in the same way that caveat emptor means buyer beware, except for some, well, there it is, caveat. What does this have to do with successful librarianship? It means that there are pitfalls out there in the world of searching, or just generally in librarianship. One must be alert to subtle differences between database and database, catalog and catalog, search engine and search engine. Check out the search tips and examples so that you're aware of whether a proximity operator works in both directions or only one direction. If you type in something, 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 do you get Venetian blinds or blind Venetians? Law school or school law, library school or school library, they're different. So you have to know when you do certain kinds of searches what works and what doesn't. The next one, a little more Latin. Occam's razor is what it's referred to as. Entia non sunt multiplicata preter necessitatem. How's that? Not so good in Latin. But what that means is, it's Occam's razor, a 14th century philosopher who came up with this. It means that entities must not be multiplied beyond necessity, and the conclusion thereof is the simplest explanation or strategy. That tends to be the right one. Well, I find that actually kind of contradictory, because what this really boils down to is keep it simple, stupid. Okay, it's the KISS principle. That's a very long way to go to say, hey, don't overcomplicate things. So what does that mean? Don't overcomplicate your searches, whether electronic or traditional. Start simple, add terms if the results are not appropriate, go from there. Now, following two very Latin phrases, oops, don't want to show that yet. I chose a popular culture thing to do next. I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk about it and then I'll show you the slide. While I'm still officially the subject librarian for both philosophy and classical studies, I'll pick one for more popular culture. And I call this one, Look Where the Light is Better. And let's look at, how do I do this without letting you see it? All right. Anyway, the slides are out of order and that's the problem. But anyway, we'll go ahead. The story goes something like this, and then I'll show you, okay? In about the year 10 BCS, anybody know what that is, 10 BCS? Before computer searching. In 10 BCS, that's before computer searching, I asked the question, was asked the question one day at the government publications microform desk, and the question was as follows. I need primary contemporary sources concerning the 1885 Montreal smallpox epidemic. Can you help me? Well, in our present time, one can easily search old online newspapers or use other electronic sources to answer the question, but this was, remember, BCS, before computer searching. Now, in 1991, some of you in the history department may know that the historian Michael Bliss wrote a book called Plague, A Story of Smallpox in Montreal, the classic book about this topic, but it was published in 91, and that was not BCS. So I couldn't use that as a way to mine the bibliography either. Nowadays, I'd go to that book first. I couldn't use that as a way to mine the bibliography, but clearly the story is a Canadian one and needed some sort of Canadian reference tool, like maybe the Canadian Periodical Index. No, that didn't start till the 1920s. Or some other Canadian index. No. Or some other full-text Canadian online. No, we've been through that. Can't do that. So what did I do? Well, I went to a book by John G. Ames called Comprehensive Index to the Publications of the United States Government, 1881 to 1893. And there it is on the shelf. It's actually not where it belongs. I moved it to get a better shot. And then I put them back in the right place. Okay, and if you look, I'll just point to the keywords here are 1881 to 1893. Okay. I looked up smallpox in the index. I don't know if you can read that. You might need the lights turned down for that, but I'll read it for you. Smallpox, precautions against, adopted by Canada and states of the U.S., report of the National Board of Health, 1885, pages 190 to 281, Senate Executive Document number 49-1, number whatever. In fact, I made a copy of it the other day, and I think I left it back in my office, so I'm sorry. I was going to hold up a copy of it. We had it on microprint, and in those days, I don't know if you could still print microprint. I think the person had to just read it on the machine. Nowadays, we have a thing called the Archive of Americana. And from the Archive of Americana, welcome, Nicole. From the Archive of Americana, I was able to print out the relevant pages just that I meant to bring today, and sorry, another prop gone. But anyway, so why did I think of looking there? The student thought I'd lost my mind. Perhaps I had. But a minute later, I had a citation to a US government document from the mid-1880s about the smallpox outbreaks all over North America that included Montreal, Chicago, New York, Boston, whatever. And we had that document, as I just said, on microprint, and now we even have it electronically. And there were indeed about 5 pages, actually I think it's more than that, including floor plans of wards, quarantine signs, hospital rules. I read some of them to Linda the other day. It sounds like H1N1 rules. I mean, you couldn't believe, there was something about nurses. If you had somebody with that smallpox in your house, you had to have 1 or 2 nurses, and they could go help you, but then they couldn't talk to the other people in the house. So it was like they were the intermediaries, but whatever. It was just unbelievable, the detail. And that was the Montreal rules from 1885. So why did I choose a clearly American index when it was a Canadian question? Because I'm me. That's the short answer. Because I remembered my old friend, Bazooka Joe. Bazooka Joe. You might do well to remember him too. If I had been wrong, I would have only wasted a minute or so. But by sticking my neck out where the light was better, I saved myself and the user many hours. And I'd say that was a pretty good trade-off. There's the citation at the bottom. It's an academic article this comes from, Contemporary Educational Psychology. Now, the article actually deals with this topic for a different reason, but the significant part is, hi Mort, hey, what are you looking for? Mort says, my keys, I think I lost them somewhere over there. So, then how come you're looking for them over here? The light is better. Now, I remember that cartoon better than this guy did, because I know it wasn't keys, it was a quarter, and I think I remember a few words of dialogue that were a bit different, but it's the same story. And I will give anybody $100 who can find me that cartoon, even on the internet. Okay, I'm desperate to find that cartoon. It has meant so much to me over the years that the light is better is a rule. Okay, now, be skeptical, number 4. Never assume that the user is asking the right question. Okay, and for all of you out there who are users, start asking the right question. No, just kidding. Ask for what you want, not for what you think you have to ask for to make the librarian or library person happy. Never believe what you read in Wikipedia if it doesn't make sense. And that's a whole other hour too. Never believe there isn't an answer to a question. There almost always is. Or C number 9, we'll get to that in a few minutes. Go beyond the call of duty. While you may be asked for what appears to be a simple question, there may be more behind it that isn't expressed by the user. Gentle probing may allow you to provide a better answer. If you know a user's interest, and I've done this lots and lots of times, and somebody even mentioned it recently to me. Somebody I hadn't seen for years said to me, I remember about 20 years ago you called me up and told me about this program that was going to be on TV because it was something I was interested in. Do that. Keep a good knowledge of the people that you're serving. If you know Professor X is interested in the history of baseball, we all know who that is here, give Bob a call and say, Bob, there's this really great PBS show coming up tomorrow afternoon on the history of baseball and early whatever. And I've done that kind of thing for Bob many times. Or if it's bibliographic, get down the details, email it to the person, whatever. Treat users well. While this should obviously go without saying, it sometimes is forgotten in busy times. Recognize people when they come to the desk, a little nod, a little wink, a little, I'll be with you in a minute, or if it's a really quick question, I'll help you if this person doesn't mind, that kind of thing. And then give them your full attention once they're your only attention that is needed. Very simple, love your work. If you love your work, it shows. Treat your coworkers well. So far I've talked about treating your users well. Well, treat your coworkers well, and they'll treat you well too. The golden rule is not really part of the 10 Commandments, but it's basically what it all boils down to. Do unto others, that kind of thing. Be honest. And that's going back to that question about can't find an answer, be honest. I can't find the answer, but I know somebody who might, or I can get back to you on that if you give me a little time. Can I have your email address? Got a great story about that too, but I think we're going to run out of time if I tell it. So get back to people when you do this kind of thing. Do get back to them. And the last one is have fun. Smiles are free. Reference librarianship, and that's all I can really speak about. I've never been any other kind of librarian, is a fun occupation, so have fun doing it. For over 35 years, if you do it for 35 years or more than that, you'll have lots of good stories to tell, I hope, and the next generation will be able to learn from your experiences. So, in short, there are the 10 suggestions. There'll be a test on this later. Hope you're writing them down. And finally, the short version, this was a letter I received a few weeks ago, and this is one of many, especially recently, that I've started receiving, but it gives you an idea of how librarians can be appreciated. This is from a professor in the writing program I did a class for a few weeks ago, and he says, Hi, Walter. Well, after almost 40 years, you've earned it, so congratulations and enjoy yourself. You've touched the lives of countless students in your various capacities, I know. Both my wife and I shared stories with each other a couple of nights ago, after I'd mentioned that you were coming in on Monday, about how you personally helped each of us on different occasions get over particular humps in our day as essay writing undergraduates at Western many years ago now. I wish you nothing but the best that retirement has to offer, and many thanks on behalf of both my past undergraduate and current professional selves. Take care, Jamie. And now, I think this is the last slide. Second to last slide. And so ends my last lecture. It has to be in purple. I thank you all for your friendship and support on these past 40 years, and look forward to many more years coming back to campus to see you again at library Christmas parties, retirement parties, any events you want to invite me to. I'm 5 minutes away, and one of the perks of retiring as a librarian emeritus, there are lots of them, Joyce outlined them in a letter to me. One is I get to keep my email address. I will use it, although I prefer Gmail for a lot of reasons too. One is I maintain access to all the databases that I'm used to. I don't have to give any of that stuff up. That means all the articles, full text journals that I get through Google Scholar searches will work. All that stuff is good. I get free parking, which is kind of ironic because when you don't need it, you get it. When you need it, you don't get it. It's one of those really silly things about Western. But anyway, I'll come back as often as you invite me. And I think for those of you who want just a quick review, thanks to Wordle. Who introduced me to Wordle? Was it you? Was it you, Kim? Somebody at a session in room 258 used Wordle. Who was it? Ruth? Oh, Ruth? Yeah, Ruth might have been, yeah. Hey, Bruce. Anyway, somebody introduced me to Wordle, and I just thought I'd Wordle my text and give you kind of a little overview of what I talked about. You can see the word Google's pretty big. No, I cheated. I put the word Google in 5 times at the end. You know, I'm so damn honest, I couldn't tell a lie. I had to tell you that I stuck Google in there a number of times just to make sure that it said Google in big letters. But students, I didn't cheat. I didn't put those words there extra time. Students, that's key. Databases, you know, whatever. You can pick out the words yourself. Ontario, library, whatever. It's making sure I don't leave out the last. Oh yes, I do have some last comments I want to say after that. Being a librarian will never make you rich, and certainly not as famous as a movie, TV, music, or movie star, athlete, politician, or writer, but it can provide great satisfaction. So I beg to differ with Mick Jagger. It's not true that you can't get no satisfaction besides being grammatically incorrect. So if you can pick the right career, and if it takes place in this warm and welcoming environment as the University of Western Ontario has been, I think you can really forget the fame of the rock stars. You can really have a great life. I thank you all for coming out today to hear me, and I hope you've either learned something useful, at least been entertained maybe, or for those of you just beginning your careers in librarianship, I hope you both learned something and been inspired in some way. I should like to thank FIMS Dean Tom Carmichael, University Librarian Joyce Garnett, Graduate Resource Center Manager Melanie Mills. Where did you go, Melanie? There you are. I haven't looked enough that direction. Marin Neville, who's not here, but sent 2 of her wonderful ITRC recording crew members, and others, there are many, many others, whose roles in arranging this I don't even know, for allowing me the opportunity to share with you something of what it has meant to me to serve the University of Western Ontario in the profession of librarianship. I also want to thank several others who made a great difference in my career. Professors Monda and Sonia Halpern from the History and Women's and Feminist Studies and Visual Arts departments, who nominated me for the Western Award of Excellence several years ago, and former Dean Peter Neary and his wife Hillary, who was almost a classmate of mine at SLIS, so we go back almost 40 years, Hillary. Peter, who nominated me for the Ontario Council of University Faculty Association Academic Librarianship Award, which sadly I didn't win, but it gave me some good material to use for the next one. My early mentors, most especially, and I don't think I've seen them here today, Patricia Gregg and George Robinson. George was here on Monday, as well as later supervisors, Marianne Mavernack, who I know isn't here but sent me a lovely card I got today, and Fran Gray, who's away at an OCL conference in Toronto. And Jennifer, you here? Did I see you? There you are. No, Jennifer Rob. I'm sorry, Jen. I love you too, Jennifer Noon, but I meant Jennifer Robinson. Jennifer here? No. Okay, she's probably at she may be at that same local thing in Toronto. I don't know. Anyway, and Claire Callahan of King's University College and St. Peter's Seminary Libraries, one of my also early mentors and good friends, and Catherine Wilkins. Do I have the title right? Assistant University Librarian for the D.B. Weldon Library. Good. I didn't look it up. I just from my head. For your leadership and guidance and support and friendship. My thanks to all of you and all of the rest of you that I didn't name. Looking out, I see in so many friends. Before I get to my next to final sentence, and I haven't looked at my watch, I hope we have time, I have several other important things to say. I've truly enjoyed working with those of you with whom I've worked, and that means either as a colleague or a partner in research. And I see another friend, Russ Boyer, back there, who has come often to me to seek my help recently. I found that this is a profession of caring people, not one that basks in glory, but one that basks in seeing the fruits of one's labor enable others to achieve what they need to achieve. And that is likely the one profession, and I think therefore librarianship has been the one profession to which I've been most suited by brain wiring, interest, and I hope I can say personality. I would not want to live my life over again with anything but being a librarian, although I might have done things a little differently, a little better perhaps in some ways. But as we all know, hindsight is 20/20, and I wear glasses, so it gives you an idea that my eyesight isn't 20/20. Now, since answering questions is something that I've been doing for a living for about 36 years, and are there any questions that you would like to ask? And remember the motto of the reference librarian: there's no such thing as a stupid question, except the question you don't ask when you need to know something. So, are there any questions? Melanie.
My question is if we could invite Joyce to say a few closing remarks and then do the questions afterwards.
Absolutely.
There's a Senate meeting taking place at 1:30.
Absolutely, Joyce. And I'm sorry, now that I've finally looked at my watch, I've gone over. I'm sorry.
Well, I hope you'll be able to hear me without the, no, don't do it. It's too complicated, although
I'll stand near you so,
yes.
so the camera can
I can speak to Walter's heart here. I want to thank Melanie for winging it like that, and I think Melanie deserves a great round of applause for initiating the idea and carrying it through to invite Walter to this particular event. So thank you, Melanie. And I also want to thank Tom as Dean of FIMS for co-sponsoring this particular event. And I think looking out in the audience, the diversity of the folks here, both in terms of chronology, longevity, the older folks you kept, it really hurts me for saying that, but also the range of constituencies that you come from, students past and present and faculty and present library staff and retired library staff, and just as you say, the groupies, the fan club. And I want to thank Walter for leading us on a voyage, a nostalgic voyage, and for me in many ways it was his history, but it was also the history of the libraries at Western, the history of libraries generally, and also the history of the evolution of the digital age that Walter embraced so heartily and led us through. And it's been years since I heard some of those initialisms that he mentioned, but they're part of my history as well. Mm-hmm. But I think what we also had today was a voyage of inspiration, of Walter modeling why it's so wonderful to be an academic librarian and why he's enjoyed it so much over the years, that insatiable curiosity, that urge to share with others, the great sense of humor and the great sense of optimism. And we will miss you, Walter, but I'm glad you're coming back for the parties. He'd make a great Santa, don't you think? And I want to thank
George Keeler makes a better one.
Well, actually, yes, but I think that keeping the ongoing relationships is what's important. That's what libraries are all about, bringing people and information together. So today, Walter walked us through that journey, that continuum from data to information to knowledge, and shared with us his wisdom. Thank you, Walter.
Thank you, Joyce.
So it's been great.
Thank you. So, thank you, Joyce. Joyce is going to go off to Senate and remind President Schachtman that librarians are important. She promised she'd do that. And Catherine, thank you for sticking around. And if you have to leave, I will understand. I'm not going to be insulted. I've already gone over, and I hope the room is still available for those of you who can stay. Oh, Pam. One of my former, and you know what? I skipped over you in the speech. I think I was ad-libbing at the time. One of my former students and great professor, Pam.
I'm doing the desk.
Okay, John's got to go to the desk. But for those who, thank you. For those who want to stay, if those who have questions, please duck under the camera. Thank you very much. Okay. I will be happy to answer any questions I can. That's what I love doing. So are there any questions? No question? Oh, Melanie, thank you.
Do you think there'll be a role for reference librarians in another 38 years?
Oh, dear. You know, there's another thing I left out of my speech that just reminded me. About 30 years ago, I was at a library school class where I'd been asked to be a guest, and I was asked what I predicted for 30 years hence. So it's a good lead-in question. And I predicted that people would have a chip implanted in the back of their head that would include things like the Encyclopedia Britannica, for example, so you'd always be able to look something up. Well, I don't have that, but I do have a cell phone that gets me Wikipedia, Google Scholar, you name it, anything I can get on the internet, I can get on this phone. Not quite in my head, but close to it. What will happen in the next 38 years? I was lucky in that guess. I was pretty close in a sense to what might happen. Things are changing so quickly. I don't know that I could, in a minute or two, come up with a good answer to that question. But I certainly do hope that there's a role for librarians. I don't know what it'll be, but I wish I could give a better answer than that. Yes, Roger.
I think that what I call information overload.
I'm sorry.
Information overload, the excess of little sort of sound bites of information is going to destroy our ability to be able to reflect or thinking long term or take a long view of something, because we can instantaneously get these facts and factoids all the time.
Did everybody hear? Did the camera hear the questions? The camera heard the question, so that's in the long run, that's what counts. The question is, will the idea of these little not sound bites so much as word bites, little news clips you get on Google News or whatever, will that? Yeah, I think it probably will, Roger. I think the ability of people to sit down and read a book cover to cover versus looking up that one little fact, because they can do it by a computer search and they can find that word of the book, and that's all they really wanted is that one little sentence or phrase that has that term in it. I think we're losing that a little bit. I think the fact that we can find something so quickly, just a little piece that we're looking for instead of reading a whole book for the pleasure of it or for the knowledge that the whole book contains. I think maybe you're right, that we're going in what might be a bad direction in a sense. I think we're maybe more focused, I guess this is one way to put it, maybe more focused on information and not knowledge. Or maybe I've got, information, the little factoids, as you call them, rather than knowledge, the broader picture of what scholarship used to be, and hopefully still is. Any other questions? Boy, I'm getting off easy. Yes, Sharon, thank you.
Walter, what are you going to do on day 1 of retirement?
Well, I don't know when day 1 is yet. I have one more work day on Monday, and that's the Christmas party. Now so I'll get some work done, but not a whole lot. But unfortunately, I had a slight back injury a few weeks ago, and it put me a little behind in getting my office cleared out. And as one might imagine, after 40 years, I have a lot to clear out. Some of you know better than others if you've been there. And Marnie, you still, is Marnie? No, she was here. You there? No. Anyway, Marnie, my next door neighbor, knows how much paper I've gotten rid of already, but how much more still has to be gotten rid of. So I still have more things to do like that, get my office cleared out. As far as work days, today and Monday, and then I'll just have to come back and volunteer to get rid of the rest of the stuff. Some of it will be passed on to some of you, some of it will go into the Ark, some of it will get thrown out, some of it will unfortunately come home. Sorry, Linda, not too much, I hope. That's how I hurt my back, is bringing one of those boxes home. Okay. By the way, and I should have said this earlier perhaps, I have a guest book here from Monday. If you weren't here Monday and you'd like to sign the guest book, we'll put a new date on it for the top of the page. Then please feel free, it's up at the front, and sign the guest book, okay, for this event. David. Does librarianship run in my family? Well, I do have somebody I used to think was either an uncle or a cousin, but I have a funny feeling it's just one of those names that you apply to somebody so close he was the librarian of the American Jewish Committee. He spoke 15 languages. I'm not sure why that's relevant, but it's just impressive. One of which is Japanese, by the way. So the U.S. government trained him in World War II to be a code breaker. After he knew, 11 or 12 or 13 languages at that point, they figured, one more Japanese, So Harry Alderman was his name. No, but I have a lot of teachers in my past. My father was a teacher until an event that I'm not going to go into. My mother was a kindergarten teacher. My sister's a teacher. Her 2 daughters are teachers. Anybody else I'm missing, Linda? And I think librarians are teachers. So if that's a fair answer, then lots of librarians in my family. No, lots of teachers in my family. Are there any others that I've seen? Oh, we did. Oh, Alexandra.
I was just wondering, did you notice a marked change in your years at Western of the types of questions you were asked? And if so, do you know why?
I don't know why, but the question was, did I notice over the years a change in the questions, the types of questions asked over the years I've been answering questions at Weldon, and if so, do I know why? And the first answer is yes, I have definitely seen a difference in the kinds of questions. We used to get lots of questions about current events and government document kinds of questions, and we can go days without a government documents question now. In fact, we can go weeks sometimes, I think. I wish I could think of better examples, but just they've certainly changed. Maybe students aren't asking the questions they used to because they're doing those themselves. They're going to Wikipedia and looking up something, and then they think they know the answer. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they think they do. As far as why, I really don't know whether it's the classes, the courses have changed their focuses. Maybe that's the case. I do know that in the case of my friend Craig Simpson back there, his students are always asking the same kinds of questions. They're looking for primary sources on really deep 19th century topics. And you can't tell a 1976 student in that class from a 2009 student in that class from the questions they ask and the papers they write. They're all of the same high caliber, the questions and the papers I gather too. But then there are other kinds of courses, whether it's sociology, whether it's politics, I don't know, where the questions do seem to be changing. And I have no real explanation except that the courses are, for some reason, changing. Or that people are answering some of the kinds of questions we used to get very easily themselves. And they only ask us the tough ones. There are more questions. Hillary.
Paul, you've been involved at Western since your days at SLIS. You've seen library education change dramatically in 40 years. You've seen the profession change. You've had a real opportunity to observe the new professionals coming into the career as you've been involved in working with them and often orienting them to librarianship. What's the major significance you've seen in that time in terms of how academic librarianship and the training for academic librarianship has developed?
Okay. Well, when I was in library school, I think I may have, trying to think how often I touched a computer of any kind. I'm not sure I ever did. We talked about things that were useful in my career as a searcher. We talked about pre-coordinate and post-coordinate indexing and keyword indexes and Boolean logic and things that weren't yet applied librarianship. They were more theoretical in a sense, or at least in our library world they were. But I think students now are getting much, much more of the, and I won't say, I don't know if information science is the right word or not, but much more of the technical stuff. And I think when they come to us as co-op students, and that's how I usually meet them, or we hire the young people, they come in way, way better prepared to do web pages or to do electronic things than I certainly was. And I think that's the major thing I can say. And there's we've hired a lot of FIM students, and they've all been good. They've been great. I don't think we've made a bad. We've had over 100. Sharon's still here. Sharon put together a list. It's on our intranet page of over 100 people. You should be keeping that up for us, Sharon, because nobody else is. Over 100 people who have gone through the reference department over the years since the early 70s, late 60s, I guess. And I can only think of one name on that list, somebody who didn't stay very long. I'm certainly not going to mention any names. Nobody here probably knows the person. Only one person who didn't really fit in well, both in terms of personality, in terms of intelligence and knowledge and care and understanding and all the things that one needs to be able to put into his or her career as a librarian. We've had as I say, one person you might call a dud, and everybody else has been great. We have a wonderful team I feel I'm leaving it in good hands. I just sent a card out. Some of you may have already read it. Anybody read it yet? Okay. Card out thanking the people who are there now for their thanking them, and also reassuring them that life will go on after Walter. It's not gonna. The department will not fall apart just as it didn't when people who retired before I did retired. We thought, oh, there goes all that knowledge and all that experience and all. You know, life goes on, and it will continue to go on. And I think in part because of, and I wish Tom was still here, but he'll hear maybe in video, because of the quality of the students or employees we get who were students at FIMS. And Berserka.
Of course, you might think this is from my point of view, but no. You see the role of retired librarian for this community.
You should have, well, actually, that's Hillary's question. I've already, the question.
Like the vast knowledge you possess,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking of Roger, even Hillary, you know, and this kind of thing.
Well, I can, yeah. If you didn't hear the question, you may not have over that side. The question is there a role for retired librarians in the library community after retirement? And Berserka, actually, you were the first person to retire as librarian emerita. Right. Well, I understand the other day, Hillary, through somebody I heard this, has already said, I've got to volunteer to work for the Friends of the Public Library. Is that true, Hillary, or did I just hear that? Oh, Carmen said that I've got to do that. Carmen said it. Well, Hillary will be happy to hear it too.
I whispered in Carmen's ear.
Oh, okay. Well, from your lips to Carmen's ears to my ears, I guess that's one of the things I'll have to do now, because I've just put it on tape, right? Well, not tape, on some kind of digital media. I think that's one role. Unfortunately, I can't work at Western Libraries anymore. That was one of the terms of my taking early retirement. But I did say on that card, Peggy is a witness, that if you don't call before noon, preferably if you just email me, if you have a short little question that I can help you with, I will still help you. I mean, I know Linda's going to say I'm crazy, aren't you retiring? But if I'm home and I get the email and I'm able to answer it with a quick little try this, maybe send you a link or whatever, I will do that, within reason anyway, until I get tired of doing it and say no more. And as I said, don't call before noon. Linda doesn't do mornings, and when I retire, I probably won't want to do mornings either. But I will probably still keep a little bit of a hand in helping people in that way. And I'll probably have to sign up as a member, will sign up as a member of Friends of the London Public Library, which Hillary and Carmen have shepherded so well so many years. I used to be, I think, on that committee, but that was only like 1 year, and now I have more time, so I guess that's another volunteer commitment. Thank you for asking the question, Berserka. You made Hillary happy. Any other questions? Roger again. Okay.
Walter, are you likely to start taking courses now? I mean, you're near the campus, and you can probably know enough people that you can sneak in and audit without the administration levying any fines on you.
Well, there's one class I would really like to attend at least once, and maybe the whole course, and it's History 3305E, because I've had so much to do with that class, and I've heard Craig speak, at many occasions, such as on Monday and before each lecture that I give, and I just would love to hear an hour of that instead of 5 or 10 minutes of it. So I think you're on the top of my list, Craig. I hope you'll let me in. And other classes, sorry?
Consider yourself
admitted. Okay. That's certainly one class I would love to attend. I plan to join, I've been told I can join, and I will join the Retired Academics Group, the RAG. One of the meetings they held, I think is it Fridays? I think it's actually today. And Bill Fisher, who I would have loved to have seen here because he's an old friend of mine, is speaking at the RAG today. So he's not here, but I would love to attend some of his classes too. And I'll attend the RAG meetings as possible, the senior alumni. That's not a real course, but I'll do as much as I can on campus. And I thank you for the reminder or the suggestion, whatever it is, that I do that. I do live 5 minutes away. I will have free parking. I do have free parking, and or I will. And that's certainly one thing I can do when I'm not traveling. We have already travel plans to go 5 places in the next 6 months. So, you know, it's a little hard in that sense. But hey, if I don't need to get a grade, if I miss a class or two, you know, so be it.
I think with that, we should likely conclude. One short story I'll share is that when I first met Walter, librarians were talking about the possibility of phased retirement, and Walter had said to me, "What a wonderful idea. I could never quit cold turkey." And I thought, who is this man that's so addicted and your passion has certainly been an inspiration to us, younger generation of academic librarians making our way through the profession. So thank you for sharing your passion with us today, Walter, and over the years. And everyone, please stay behind and ask Walter your questions.
And enjoy the food, because it's been paid for whether you eat it or not. And not my bill, but somebody's paying for it. And there is, as I say, the guest book. So if you didn't get a chance to sign on Monday, if you weren't there and you want to sign to show you were here, I won't consider it the full attendance because I know people left, but I'll pull it out, leave a pen there. Just please don't take it away with you. Sharon, we have something to do later. And well, I'll just show you something else. There's a book, I know I said that was supposed to be the end, right? There's a book here called Searching 2.0. This is one of 2 books that was that were a donation to the Western Libraries on behalf of my in honor, I guess, of my retirement. And if you look in the library catalog, and you can all do this too, not for me, but for other people, you can make donations to the library. I wish Joyce was still here to hear me say this. Or Sherry Foster, our what do we call her, the ADO, the development officer. Anyway, development officer, fundraiser. In any case, this book and another book were donated in honor of my retirement. And there's a thing called an electronic book plate. You should all consider using electronic book plate donations in your. Sure.
Just doing a little news story for the
Little news. Okay, well, let's be the picture. Oops, sorry. There we go. Okay, and with my book tie too. Thank you for taking the picture. So go to the Western Library's home webpage and follow the links. I can't tell you where they start, but follow the links to supporting Western Libraries and make a donation in honor of somebody, in memory of somebody, and just thanks to somebody. And this is a book, Searching 2.0, what an appropriate book, and the other one is also an appropriate book. And when people search for this book, they'll see Walter Zimmerman donation or something like that. And you can have your name on there too, or you can make donations in honor or in memory or whatever of other people. So a little plug for the libraries, they've been so good to me. So do that. If anybody wants to see the Alice Munro book. Thank you. Class dismissed.